Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
What is news is a difficult question to answer. Sometimes it also depends on where you stand or where you are. So we know that all governments, all nations, all leaders, all rulers like good news, what they see as good news. So good news is the best news, and if they can't get good news, then at least no news is good news. So if my country is being praised to high heavens as the new tech marvel, as the new driving force behind the world's economy, as the fourth or the fifth or the third, depending on how you calculate it, largest economy in the world, then you say it is good news. But if you are not getting that, or if you have stories saying that people in Silicon Valley are now saying they got Bangalored. Why? Because tech industry, tech startups in Bangalore took away their jobs. Then you feel proud, that's good news. Then there can be a period when there is no news. So you say, all right, maybe I am not getting publicity, but no news is good news. That is a kind of consolation. Then you get to the third stage where you get a lot of news. And a lot of it is news that is genuine, that is verifiable, that is visible to everybody, also to your domestic media. Now, everybody in your domestic media may not cover it or the same way, but a lot of the domestic media does. In any case, what's happening in your country in front of your eyes, what you can hear, what you can watch, what your own government's data is saying, that is something that is not hidden from the world anymore. This is a very open world, and the world finds out what's going on, and the world then covers it, or the world media then covers it as it deems fit. There is very little leverage that governments around the world have on what is called as international media. In any case, what leverage does country A have over media in country B? For example, even if you look at the case of China, China has this incredibly entertaining newspaper called Global Times, whose main job is to basically needle China's rivals, and India is a favorite. Now, can Indian government use any leverage to get Global Times to shut up? Or can Xi Jinping use any leverage to get Government of India to get any Indian media organization to shut up? It doesn't work like that. That's why it was quite a surprise today when we saw a story in the Indian Express from Nirupama Subramanian, my old colleague and friend, very good reporter. When she writes something, I presume that it's accurate. She reported that our Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and his Deputy Muralidhar, when they were talking to Indian envoys from across the world, and the agenda was how to get more help for India, how to get more resources from India, from oxygen generators to maybe oximeters to medicines, remdesivir, etc., etc., etc. While they were talking about that, they also talked about the need to change the global media's discourse on India. That too many negative stories were coming out. Now, frankly, I made a mistake just now when I said that it was a surprise. The fact is, it should not have been a surprise, but it's also because so much is happening these days that you don't always get the perspective immediately. So we should have expected something like this when our High Commission in Canberra wrote a very angry, I must say badly worded, something must have gone wrong with the Indian Foreign Service, because one thing they are very good at is drafting, particularly in English language. Anyway, this was a badly drafted letter, almost as if it was drafted, I'm sorry to say so, as if it was drafted in Phnom Penh or Beijing or one of those places. So it was a badly drafted letter on a bad letterhead, so much so that on the official Indian High Commission letterhead, even on the top, somebody had cut out the old email address and written a new one or the current one in longhand, in pen. Nevertheless, let's not be elitist with this. I only said this because it is our High Commission's note. Nevertheless, when we saw that note to the Australian, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, it's a big-time, powerful newspaper in Australia, we knew that one, the paper will dismiss it with contempt, as the paper did. We also knew that this letter will now make more news than the original article in the paper had done. And we also knew that this letter and this kind of prickly response from India will actually give that article more credibility and not do any good to India or India's image. Or if the idea was to protect Narendra Modi and his government's image, it ended up doing exactly the opposite. So if you want to know how a letter like that or how a protest like that would actually end up achieving the opposite, see what the Australian responded with next day. It carried another story, big headline, and the headline is Indians still dying, dying and dying. Now, you have to understand that you can get somebody to shut up, you can charm somebody, you can bribe somebody, you can threaten somebody, intimidate somebody, but this story is now out. This genie is out of the bottle because everybody sees it. And this is happening in our national capital. Our national capital, everybody, okay, you may find me the odd one to prove me wrong that not everybody has it, but that's a metaphor. Everybody has a smartphone, everybody knows how to use social media, everybody knows how to air grievances. And what's happening right now is that this tragedy has become so widespread that nobody is spared. So many loyalists of Modi government, many voters, many leaders of the BJP, many officials who work closely with it, they are affected or their families are affected. So they are talking. Also, the pictures of what is happening, the evidence of what is happening, waiting ambulances, patients waiting in ambulances for hours and hours of hours, patients dying in ambulances, a former Indian ambassador to 3 countries dying in the parking lot of a big hospital in Gurgaon because he could not get admission because the hospital is full. All those stories cannot be hidden. If they cannot be hidden from Indian media and the people of India, how would they be hidden from global media? And how can you tell global media to not run them? Can Prime Minister of India call Rupert Murdoch and say, hey, Rupert Murdoch, you have the Wall Street Journal and you own the Australian, you stop running these articles. Now we know that our Ministry of Information Technology has also responded to a story in the Wall Street Journal. So that is also owned by Murdoch. Messrs. Dow and Jones must be shaking in their boots that our Information Technology Minister has taken on them. This is not the way to handle world opinion about yourselves when the story is not good enough. The best thing then is to be humble, truthful, and also share information. And then see that if you are trusted for being truthful, the media itself at least acknowledges. They will not play down anything, but at least they will acknowledge that you're trying to do something. But if the government is in denial and they want to force that denial down any media's throat, least of all international media's throat, it's not going to work. And I will give you some samples of what's going on with international media. So my colleague Tenzin Zompa did a story just yesterday, which I am sharing with you, which talked about global coverage of what's happening in India. And she talked about aerial shots of cremation sites. Some people got very upset saying that this is Hindu phobia, but a majority of Indians are Hindus. The majority of those who are dying are Hindus. When Hindus die, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, we die, we are committed to fire. Our bodies are committed to fire. And that's the reality. When Iran was having its large-scale deaths, we also had pictures of mass graves in Iran or mass burial sites in Iran. When Manhattan had it, we had pictures from there. So this happens everywhere because media reaches everywhere, and even before the media reaches, the citizen reaches, or people who have grievances or people who are suffering, they reach and they share visual evidence of what's going on. So this story then goes on to say, as most other stories go on to say, they hold Modi and his government responsible for bringing an avoidable tragedy upon India with wrong messaging, declaring victory too early and allowing a full-fledged Kumbh Mela and a full-fledged election campaign and not stopping until it was too late. That is the thread running through all this coverage. Now, New York Times had a story. Headline is, as COVID-19 devastates India, deaths go uncounted. And this story and the multiple bylines goes on to say that there is also a complete massacre of data in India, which means India is undercounting its deaths. Now, if you go to many Indian crematoria, etc., and they also mention this New York Times story, that they've been told to mention the cause of death as sickness, as illness, not as COVID-19. And that is something that Sonia Agrawal reporting from Ahmedabad for us, from Gujarat for us, and I will share that story with you. She also reported that crematoria, graveyards are being told to list bimari, sickness, not COVID in as many cases as possible. That's the reason, the way to come to the real number of COVID deaths, at least in cities with well organized municipalities where deaths are registered almost totally. The way to do that is to see the average number of last rites in normal times, the current number of last rites in this COVID wave, how many of these additional numbers were ascribed to COVID, and see what is left. And there is a gap, and that's a story that we'll be carrying very soon, again done by Tenzin, because she's been spending time at Delhi's largest graveyards and crematoria, because truth must come out. The truth must come out. Hiding the truth doesn't change the truth. You cannot spray anything. You cannot spray anything. The finest French perfume, the finest Indian atars will not make a truth which stinks start smelling good. It simply cannot happen. Could not happen in the past. Even in 1989, the Chinese could not hide it. What happened in Tiananmen Square? In 1975, Indira Gandhi expelled all the foreign media from India because they said they were a kind of Western conspiracy, part of the Western conspiracy. It didn't help her image. After that, she was giving interviews to the Western media and making up to them. At one point, we had expelled all Western media, all foreign media, say from Kashmir, other regions. All that was counterproductive. So once again, picking up this fight is counterproductive, because this is close to what our stories are today. Because there is another piece that I find which talks about unmasked Modi campaigning. The article that the High Commission got upset about, it actually said that this is because of arrogance, hyper-nationalism, bureaucratic incompetence combined to create a crisis of epic proportions in India, with its crowd-loving prime ministers basking while its citizens suffocate. And citizens are suffocating for sure because they are short of oxygen. And we look elsewhere. In fact, this is the view of the global media, but we are limited by our knowledge of only English. But look at Le Monde. Le Monde is a big French paper. Le Monde's editorial is actually probably the toughest of all. It is viciously critical of Narendra Modi and his government. But it's not as if Mr. Modi can pick up the phone and ask Emmanuel Macron and tell him to get Le Monde to behave or else, because Mr. Macron cannot do it. Le Monde will be what Le Monde is. Just as The Economist would be what it is, Financial Times would be what it is. There are two articles in the Financial Times, one from Gideon Rahman, its chief foreign affairs correspondent. Please read that article. I will share the link with you, who also ascribes what's happened in India to this premature declaration of victory, and also hubris and not listening to scientists. Besides that, Amy Kazmin and others in a joint byline story talk about how Xi Jinping could take advantage of it. How? Not by pushing his armies into eastern Ladakh, that Indian army is capable of taking care of, but by encircling India diplomatically, by reaching out to India's neighbors to say, look, we know that you have similar problems. You were counting on India's help, particularly for vaccines and pharmaceuticals. India right now has its own shortages, so India has to fend for itself. Meanwhile, can we help you? So they called a meeting of the South Asian region or subcontinental foreign ministers, where they said, mark their words, where they said Indian foreign minister is also welcome. So they were challenging India's notion of leadership in this subcontinent, and they got away with it because they know that India is distracted. So these are realities that we cannot run away from. So there is also 24th April, there is also 24th April editorial in the Washington Post that said that this tragedy, this situation is avoidable as it's tragic, and it says that Harshvardhan, our health minister, in the middle of March, when the wave was picking up, he actually said India has entered the COVID endgame, Straits Times in Singapore. Ravi Velloor, who's the associate editor, he says that unmasked Narendra Modi going out to election rallies gave a wrong message, because how can you be addressing a rally unmasked and asking everybody to be masked? Nobody at those, very few people, I won't say nobody, but very few people at those rallies were masked, and nobody really cared. Whereas other ministers of the government, party president, etc., they were holding road shows without masks on top of open trucks and vehicles when everybody around them was also without masks. So in his article, Ravi Velloor also asks that he would like to know what cabinet meetings in India are like. Do India's cabinet ministers tell the Prime Minister what's going on? And he says two of his cabinet colleagues are former, senior, very accomplished Indian Foreign Service officers who've seen the world. What are they telling him? And he also asks that what is the health minister telling him? He's a qualified doctor. Besides that, this year, he's also the chair of the WHO executive board. In fact, yesterday or day before, I think yesterday was the board meeting on which our health minister tweeted. Then you have the I told you so's coming out. Ramanan Lakshmi Narayanan, he's an epidemiologist. Last year, he had made dire predictions on India, which some of us thought were wrong. I also thought was wrong. We poo-pooed them and we were vindicated. Now he's back. Now you might question him that how are you claiming vindication for what you predicted for last summer for what is happening this summer. But these things don't confuse people. He's now raising because the questions he's raising now are genuine. That India declared victory too soon. India left the battle too soon, thinking that the foe was vanquished when it was not vanquished. Maybe it was just staging a tactical retreat and came back and hit you when you were going home and when you were celebrating. New York Times has one more article which discusses the point that many in India think, particularly in the Indian establishment, that India's problems are because of the new variant, that is B.1.617. Once again, they debate it, they talk to many doctors, but there is one more story that you have to see. In India's devastating surge, anger against Modi grows. And there is some element of that anger growing, because a lot of the people who are getting affected are voters of the BJP, because there are more voters of the BJP. There are twice as many voters who voted for Narendra Modi and the BJP last time in the national elections than voted for the next largest party, that is the Congress. And a lot of the BJP leaders, BJP legislators, civil servants who work close to the BJP, they are getting affected, or their families are getting affected. So all that's having an impact. In this situation, to try and shoot the messenger, or to strangle the messenger, or to teach the messenger something, or maybe the old method of sending the messenger a gift or something, those things don't work. Those things won't work, because everybody also works in a competitive environment. So this bus has left the station, or this train has left the station. Now the best way of fixing the India story, of repairing the India story, is to repair the India situation, is to repair the story itself, not the telling of the story, and then being transparent and truthful with some humility and sharing information, because then, as I said, at least people will say these guys are trying. But before all of that, somebody has to say we've gone wrong, something has gone wrong. That usually you don't see with these triumphalist strongman governments. And you know, foreign media, even say between India and China, India is a powerful country. Now Global Times always makes fun of India. Global Times looks to me like a special purpose vehicle to needle some adversaries of America, because they know most people will not have something in Mandarin translated, so they will see this in English. It's specially done for their foreign audiences. Now, can Narendra Modi, even when the Wuhan spirit is on, pick up the phone and ask Xi Jinping to get Global Times to behave? If Xi Jinping wants them to behave, he might ask them. But why should he ask them unless he gets something in return? He'll be transactional in that situation, and India does not, no Indian leader would want to make that transaction. Similarly, no other country will allow another country to put pressure on its media, even if it's a friendly country. Besides everything else, in democracies, rulers, ruling parties, governments have almost no leverage or limited leverage, if at all, in India. Government of India, particularly Modi government, has enormous leverage over the media that other countries don't have. So, because we talk global times, I will mention to you also, just for a little bit of entertainment or maybe dark humor, Hu Shijin, the editor-in-chief of Global Times, has written an article making fun of the US for coming too late to India's help. The headline, US vaccine to help India, too little, too late. And then he goes on to say how the Americans have taken too long, and the routine thing they are doing is making out to be a big deal. Now, as I talk of the foreign media, and government of India complains about the foreign media, also look at what our own media is doing. Now, if I look at everything, it will take for too long. So let me blow my own trumpet, because I have a good trumpet to blow, which means I have a good story to tell, or a good story of fantastic, terrific journalism to tell. Not my journalism, but that of my young colleagues. So I'll mention a bunch of names to you. This is not exhaustive or comprehensive. I will keep mentioning more names. And remember, for every reporter's name I mention, reporters in a newsroom are like pilots on a fighter plane. You hear about pilots, but no pilot can get up there. No pilot can trust his or her engine or weapon systems or radar. Everything happens beyond visual range. So there has to be some smart person on the ground also watching all that on a larger radar and directing you. So just as a fighter pilot is nothing without the engineers who fixed his engines, repaired his engines, serviced his aircraft, mounted the weapons there, fixed its electronics, software, gave him instructions. Similarly, no reporter can work without other heroic people who sit back, people on the editing desk, and what is called as content management system, because they are the selfless ones. They don't get the bylines. Just like the fighter pilot gets the glory, but person down there has the satisfaction that he or she made it possible. So I can't mention all the names, but I will mention some for you. So there is Anisha Bedi, who reported from Rajasthan, who gave us a good idea of how Rajasthan has been such a success with its vaccination program, talking to Asha workers and others at the ground level. Those are very granular stories. Please see those. I will share all these stories with you as links. Also, you will see screenshots as I speak along. There is Angna Chakrabarti, who's been traveling in Maharashtra. At this moment, she is in Mumbai. Today, she reported from one of Mumbai's big control rooms on how well Mumbai is managing. At least Mumbai is not seeing the panic that Delhi is seeing. Delhi is like what we used to say, every man for himself. I believe now they say every person for themselves. So that is what's happening in Delhi. You don't see that to that extent. In fact, not to a fraction of that extent in Mumbai. In this story, she tells you how. Before that, she did a story called the Pune Paradox. How Pune, which is the home of Indian biosciences with the National Institute of Virology there, and Serum Institute, the biggest vaccine manufacturer, but Pune has had such a rough time with COVID spread. And also one from Yavatmal in the other part of Maharashtra, which is always water-starved, on how farmers are worried that the second wave of COVID will now deny them supplies for the second time also, just as the first wave had done last year. Then Unnati Sharma and Urjita Bhardwaj have traveled in Haryana. They told us the story of how Haryana seems to have only one government lab, and that lacks credibility. They also talked about her temples and mosques and Gurdwara. See, with all bad news stories, there is an uplifting story. An uplifting story is a story of a fight back. So story where a temple, mosque and Gurdwara have got together to persuade people to go for testing and vaccinations. Jyoti Yadav has been filing her stories from Eastern UP. You saw the story today on this woman, 8 months pregnant teacher, who was made to go on Panchayat election duty. It was her first month in employment. She was told that if she doesn't go, she won't get her salary and FIR will be filed against her. So she went there, got sick and died without treatment, as did her unborn baby. It's a very touching story. Please see, it came out today. She also did a story earlier from 2 Varanasi villages, talking about how earlier the villagers thought that COVID was an urban conspiracy. It was nothing that was going to happen to them. But when they saw the young get sick and die, they realized that this was a bigger problem. Also a story from Jaunpur on why big surge has taken place. Jaunpur is one of the biggest exporter of migrant labor. So a lot of them came back either because they lost their jobs in the cities or for Holi. And they apparently brought the virus with them and spread it. Simran Sarur, who is a familiar byline to you, she was at Kumbh and she reported how so many of the devotees were not bothered. They were not fearing the virus. They said, Lord will protect us or Ganga Maya will protect us. Now we know there is every evidence that many of them have got infected and have taken the virus back to their villages. And that tragedy now we see sort of playing out in the villages of UP and Bihar, which have really very primitive health facilities. Samyak Pandey went to Punjab and he reported how migratory labor did not want to go back because they were being looked after by Punjab farmers and they were happy to stay on there instead of going back. Sonia Agarwal, I told you earlier, reported from Gujarat on how crematoriums, graveyards are being told to list the cause of death as Bimari, not COVID. In Surat, she also brought an uplifting story of how a hospital had reduced a 15-hour wait to 5 hours. This was a big achievement there. And that is a big relief to patients also. Shubhangi Mishra spent a full night at Delhi's biggest government COVID facility, that is the Loknayak Jayaprakash Narayan Hospital, and brought you a very touching, granular story. Maushmi Das Gupta, again traveling in eastern UP, has brought us granular stories of how UP's rural healthcare structure is now crumbling, how poor it is, how primitive it is, and how it's crumbling. Revati Krishnan and Taran Deol, they traveled through Madhya Pradesh to bring you a slew of stories. One, talking about how crematoria and graveyards are now increasing space because they can't cope with the load that they are getting. They also found the site of an oxygen plant where the foundation stone was laid with great fanfare last year by the Chief Minister, who said in 6 months this will be producing oxygen. All they found there was a sort of primitive boundary wall and some dug up earth. Nothing has happened. So the best reality check to government claims is to go to the ground and check, and that is what reporters from the print are doing. They also went to ASHA workers and spent time with them to see how ASHA workers are struggling to persuade people to accept vaccination and testing. And Shravasti Dasgupta in Chhattisgarh reported a story that was read a great deal, again a sad story of how hospitals are running short of funeral vans. With them, you've also seen really brilliant photographers and cameramen and camera women. So there is Sajid Ali Mir, who's right now in UP reporting from there. There is Praveen Jain, the one and only Praveen Jain. There is Manisha Mandal, Suraj Singh Bisht, and many, many others. So this is this marvelous team of young people whose average age, if I take out Praveen Jain, whose average age would be early 20s. Look at the marvelous job they've done. And keep watching it because it's not just the foreign media. Indian media also is bringing you realistic, true, correct story.